Hello and welcome to this City Nature Challenge Nature Chat. I'm Victoria Burton from the Natural History Museum in London, and over the bank holiday weekend we had over 3,000 people out snapping photographs of nature on their doorsteps and sending them in via the free iNaturalist app for the International City Nature Challenge. This year saw over 400 city regions worldwide, including 14 in the UK, working together to put wildlife on the map. And across the whole of the UK, you've collected an amazing over 54,000 wildlife observations. The chance to take photos in the field is now over, but we do have a few days left to upload and process our sightings before the final tally is announced on Monday the 10th of May. We're asking you to help identify some of the unknown species that have been found and pick out some of the highlights. Full instructions on how to take part can be found in the link in the video description. To help, this afternoon we'll be meeting live with UK wildlife experts to get some ideas on how to help identify some of the species on there. And today, now we're meeting, it's my pleasure to welcome Katy Potts from the Natural History Museum as well, to chat with us today about her work on beetles. If you have any questions about beetles, identification and recording, or anything else, please do drop them in the comments. Welcome, Katy.
Hi.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you do and why you're interested in beetles?
Yeah. Hi everyone. So I'm Katy Potts. I work at the Natural History Museum in London on a project called Brilliant Butterflies. So slightly different from my beetle work I'm going to talk about today. But the Brilliant Butterflies project is all about restoring and creating chalk grassland habitats in Croydon and Bromley. So my main role at the minute with that is undertaking eDNA soil surveys, doing invertebrate surveys like mallees and pitfall trappings. So I'm kind of looking at all inverts at the minute, which is no small feat. But my previous roles in the museum have been working in the beetle department on African beetles, which was incredible. Got to see some incredible beetles in that job. And then I also worked as an identification trainer for the future on the ID Trainers project for short. And that was a really great year, being taught by museum experts how to identify all groups of tricky UK wildlife. So things like parasitic wasps and beetles and lichens and fungi and all sorts of wonderful wildlife. So yeah, that's a little bit of a blurb.
Yeah, what is it particularly about beetles that gets your attention there?
Oh, well, I feel like my main interest really in beetles developed through reading all about the different ecologies and lifestyles that they have. They're so diverse, and just learning about species like the acorn weevil and how they use their rostrum, which is like a long nose-like structure, and they drill them into acorns to lay their eggs, and oil beetle larvae, and how the oil beetle larvae will climb up stems and they sort of sit on the top of the flower heads waiting for solitary mining bees to fly by, and they jump onto their legs, hitch a ride back to the nest, and where then their larvae are then sort of nest parasites of the bees' larvae. And it's all these fascinating stories that just really grabbed me. And then, yeah, you just kind of want to learn more and find out more about all the different species. Yeah.
God, there's a lot of different beetles, I understand, in the UK.
Yeah,
is that right?
1,000, yeah.
So that can be a bit overwhelming. That can be a bit overwhelming for people. And what would you suggest is a good place to start with beetles?
I'd say starting with some of the groups a bit like the longhorns, for example. They're quite easy, and I sort of describe them a little bit like some butterflies in the sense that you can match a lot of the patterns and the colours. If you are already used to using guides and keys and things like that, then maybe starting with a group like the ground beetles, where there's a fantastic key that you can really get stuck in with if you want something a little bit more tricky. Ladybirds are great because there's a fantastic recording scheme for them, and there's loads of great sort of like fold out charts and guides and things like that. Yeah, I'd say that's like my top 3 to sort of get stuck in with. I think beetles are such a great group to start recording because there's so many of them. You're never bored. That's with insects in general.
I certainly agree with you there.
But I guess, yeah, in terms of sort of trying to start identifying them as well, now's a great time because the hawthorn's just about to start blossoming, depending on where you are in the country. But you see loads of beetles appearing on all of the blossoms, but particularly they love the hawthorn blossom, longhorn beetles, lots of the sort of tumbling flower beetles in the family Mordelidae, lots of pollen beetles, loads of beetles on all of the umbellifers and the hawthorn. So you can just simply, if you've got a beating tray, you can use that. But if you haven't got a beating tray, you can use something like an umbrella or a sheet, pop it underneath, just use use a stick, don't use a chick, to gently tap the blossom, and you should see lots of insects falling out. So you can have a little look for longhorns at the minute, they're starting to emerge. Yeah.
Great, okay. So we're asking people to have a look on our City Nature Challenge photographs on iNaturalist and help identify the beetles. Is there any particular tips for, I mean, if people have already put up their photos this weekend, but if they're wanting to put up photographs in the future, is there any particular best kind of things to photograph with beetles that helps you identify them, or even just a particular family group?
Yeah, so I think with all sort of like when you're recording online, take as many photos as you can of all different angles. Beetles, if you're looking at different families, the antennae can be quite important. So if you can try and get a nice picture of the antennae at the front of the head. It really does depend then sort of what family you're looking at and the different features that are important for those families, which is why I always think if you can just get a nice photograph that's clear from above, take one from the side, and if you can get one from underneath, great. And maybe one slightly further away, if you can get some that are sort of more zoomed in, that's also great, because sometimes the perception of size of certain species is sometimes important. So there's two species of longhorn, for example, Gramoptra rificornis, and there's another one that's very rare-ish that's quite similar, but the size difference can be quite prominent sometimes in some specimens. So little examples like that where the perception is quite important.
Does it help to have something for scale perhaps in the photos? Is that useful?
That's a great idea, yeah. I always use a coin or something like that, a 5 pence piece or something like that.
Ah, some good tips. And so you said about how going out and beating flowers or just watching flowers is a good time to find beetles this time of year. Is there any other good ways to go out and find beetles at all? What other techniques are useful for spotting them?
Yeah, gosh. Looking under dead wood is a fantastic way to find all sorts of inverts, actually, but particularly lots of beetle larvae, lots of deadwood type beetles. So depending on where you are in the country, you can get really lucky and you can find things like stag beetles. I'm so lucky to have one in my garden. I've got lesser stag beetles in my garden. If you're sort of near like an area where there's meadows or grasslands and things like that, you can take out a little butterfly net and just use like a figure of 8 sweeping motion across the sort of the grass to then have a look at what insects or beetles that you can find. Yeah, that's what I would say the main methods without involving traps and all sorts of complicated ways to find them. But yeah, at the minute as well, you'll start to see them on flower blossoms and things like that.
So you've mentioned the longhorn recording scheme and the ladybird recording scheme. I understand there's probably others as well. Do you know about some of the ways that data on these is helping the species? I mean, why is recording them important?
Yeah. Well, having a good understanding of what species we have, where and when, is just imperative to their conservation. It allows us to see the changes in a species distribution over time. And when we do sort of spot that a species is declining or maybe changing in its distribution, we can start to ask questions about what might be happening. Is there sort of land use change in that area? Have they chopped down a woodland, built over a meadow? Is there increased urbanization with houses? And then we can start to hopefully make changes towards the conservation of those declining species. But without that data in the first place, we can't see the changes happening. So collecting data is so important. And I'd also say it's really important to record the common species as well. I quite often hear people saying, oh, but it's so common, I won't send that record in. But send everything in, because if we don't record everything, we won't spot the changes. So what's common now might not be in the future. So we need to spot those declines when they happen. And don't underestimate how important or impactful your data is. Like I mentioned, I co-run the Longhorn Beetle recording scheme with Will Heaney, and we're just always blown away by the number of records we get sent and the picture, or like the overall picture that data gives us when we've pulled it all together is just so invaluable. So yeah.
So that's a good reason to get on iNaturalist, and we'll try and get some of those unknown beetles at least up to a family level. I know we know that there's going to be lots of those small little black ones, I suspect, that won't be able to get the species, but at least then we can sort through and put the ones that we can on through that, and that information can go towards things like measuring environmental change and helping to inform planning decisions. So is there any different resources you particularly recommend for beetle identification? You mentioned a couple of the books. I don't know if there's any particularly good websites or online forums and things, or societies available.
I think if you're just getting interested in, if you just want to sort of get your head around a little bit of the diversity, I don't know if you can see that properly. Can you see that? So this is a fantastic book. It's called Insects, or A Comprehensive Guide to Insects of Britain and Ireland. And it's by Paul D. Brock. And this book is just great. It's got, let me get, there we go. So that's a little example of one of the pages for the beetles. It's got all the, wrong side. Oh, got us all back to front when I'm pointing. It's got all the pictures on this side, and it's got little descriptions of the species. So it just helps you to see where you might find certain species, but then also just allows you to see roughly in a nice sort of panel on a book what a family looks like, what the diversity within a family looks like. So, and obviously with that, then you can record all the other insects too. There's the UK beetle recording website is great. It's got all of the families on. It's got nice images of all the families, bits of like information about, you know, the general characters around that family and their habits. And then it's also got links to recording schemes if there's a recording scheme set up for them. So that's another great resource. There was a fantastic website called Mark Telfer's, but I believe that's been taken down now. But a lot of his information he had on there is now being sort of shared on the Beetles of Britain and Ireland page on Facebook. So that's another great place to put your identifications as well if you're trying to learn. And I find there's generally quite a lot of really helpful feedback on that group. So yeah, and then there's if you just want to sort of get a bit more of a background information on how to record beetles, there's a book called Beetles, and this is not very helpful because I can't remember who wrote it. Do you know which one I mean, Vicky? Hang on, I'll just I think it was
Beetles.
That was utterly useless of me, sorry. There, Richard Jones. Beetles.
Yes.
Sorry. So that's a fantastic book, sort of a big overarching everything you could need to know really about British beetles. So
yeah, it's one of the new naturalist guys, isn't it? Lots of information about natural history of beetles.
That's it.
Anklets and things.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
So, also, I think.
So longhorn beetles are useful to get out and record. Ladybird beetles. And it should be stag beetle season, I believe. It won't be long. I'm lucky I live in a stag beetle area, and in pre-pandemic times I used to time my commute for sundown so I could watch stag beetles flying ridiculously over the roads. And
do you ever see any males?
Yeah, they're just absolutely ridiculous. How are you flying?
Yeah. It's like a little helicopter through the sky, isn't it? They're huge.
They're wonderful.
Yeah, and the dung beetle recording scheme is an absolutely fantastic recording scheme, and they've got brilliant ID resources. So that's another group to get stuck into, because there's quite a nice range within that group, because you've got the door beetles with a bit of practice. They're quite easy to get your eye in for, some of them. And there's great resources. And then if you really want a bit of a challenge as you move on, then there's all the aphrodines. So they're quite tricky, or they can be. And yeah, I just think dung beetles are great. They're so interesting to read about their ecologies, and Yeah. Also, the Sylphid recording scheme is another great one that's got fantastic resources. They've got a joint key with the hysterids, and that's kind of just come out in the new atlas. And the recording scheme is run by Ashley, and yeah, great resources.
They're the carrion beetles.
Yeah, that's it, the carrion beetles. Sorry. Yeah.
So they're the ones that often turn up in moth traps, is that right? And sometimes a bit smelly. And
yeah, you can find them in your moth traps, or if you find something like a little dead mouse or something like that in your garden, you might find that there's a little family of carrion beetles living under them. They've got really interesting parental behavior where the males and the females work together, and they basically sort of strip a little carcass, let's say it's a mouse, and they'll lay their eggs inside, and they use it as a little nursery for their young.
Wonderful. Wow.
It's full of weird and wonderful.
Max mentioned they had lesser stag beetles and rhinoceros beetles recorded as part of City Nature Challenge in Bath. Gosh, I've never seen a rhinoceros beetle. Have you, Katie?
Yeah, I've got one in the garden, but I haven't seen it for about 5 years. But these things sometimes pop back up and you think, oh no, I haven't seen that for a species of that for so long. And obviously some of them as well, they have really long life cycles as larvae, so sometimes it can be a bit of a time lapse before you see one again, maybe, because they might not be that abundant. But that's great that you recorded them.
So the rhinoceros beetle, another one of these beetles that lives in dead wood as a larva and just has a very short lifespan as an adult, is that right?
Yeah, generally. I think as well, stag beetles can live as larvae around up to 7 years. So it's a huge difference. So they really just need to feed and build up all those resources for actually quite a short adult life in comparison to their larval life. So, yeah.
So in some ways we're kind of looking at the wrong end of the life cycle, just the very small part of their life.
Yes.
All that previous thing.
Yeah.
And Rosemary Parks mentioned the glowworm recording scheme as well. Yes, I have seen glowworms in the past, but I've never seen them glowing, and I'm told that's because they has to be really quite dark before you see that, and I'm not one for wandering around in the dark. But have you seen much of the glowworms? Possibly you've seen it as part of your chalk grasslands work, because I understand they habitat.
With the pandemic, we haven't actually been able to see it all that much, which is such a shame. But I have seen them down the road from where I live. I live in Devon, and I do walk my dog fairly late sometimes in the summer. So I was walking in the lanes, and I thought, oh, how odd! There was a house, and then nothing. It was in the middle of nowhere, and I thought, that's funny. They must have a funny little light sensor to see if somebody walks past. And I went up and had a look, and it was a glowworm. I was amazed. But the only other, that was the first time I've ever seen them here. And then I've seen them when I was in India, and it was like they were just fairies dancing over this sort of like wet area near a river. That was amazing. And also in Indonesia. So I've seen them abroad, but not so much here.
Yeah, so they lived near the Portsdown Hill when I lived in Portsmouth. There's quite a lot around there, but I never went out late enough at night to actually see them glowing. But I used to find them during the day sometimes, and the larvae as well. They're amazing looking things. And of course, the females are very odd and looking as well.
Yeah.
Describe a bit about them?
It's easy to get them confused, isn't it? Because they do I think, I don't know who the chap is that runs the recording scheme for the glowworms. Do you know?
Not off my head, no. But I believe
there is one, because I was sort of researching it last year after I spotted my specimen, but we'll see. I like to try and record as much as I can in the field, so I will go back and see if it's produced more over the past year in that area.
Yes, I suppose that's something important we can do as well, go back to areas where we've seen things and see if we can see things again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we all sort of, it's easy to, or I think sometimes there's a tendency to, rush off to spot where some rare or fancy insect or bird or whatever it is it might be sighted. But we really underestimate the value and the importance of recording in your local area. So if it's your garden or if it's a little local wildlife spot, you can bring so much value to that area by, putting your records on iNaturalist and iRecord and things like that. Really important.
That's good to know, because I sometimes feel like I'm recording my 7-spot ladybird in the garden again. Does that really matter? And so that's nice to know that it is still worth doing that. I've seen it again, but that's okay. I can still record that, and it's still worth it.
Definitely. I get excited by all the common things. They're all fascinating to me. So there's definitely value in just recording everything you see, and you learn as well. I think you learn so much by recording everything and taking time to learn, maybe whatever works for you. Because I think a lot of people learn in different ways. I like to learn top down, so I like to learn beetle families, and then I might dive into, what makes that genus, rather than trying to learn lots of different individual species. But it's kind of what works for you. So if you prefer to sort of learn and identify species, maybe pick 3 or 4, and you can really focus in on those and really get your head around them. Or if you learn the other way, a bit like me, focusing in on just a family and really learning everything you can about that family, I find that can be quite a good way to learn.
Well, so it sounds like there's a way for all different people to get involved, even if you can only recognise a couple of species. That's still something you can just keep recording and be useful.
Yeah, definitely.
Rosemary has said it's Robin Skygill, which is a recorder of glow. Also an astronomer, I says. I see that there's a very good combination of nighttime activities.
Yeah. Oh yeah, well that goes hand in hand, doesn't it? That's quite cool.
Yeah, both need nice clear skies, I imagine. Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, are there any other questions anyone's got?
Well, I'm wondering, I don't think we've got any other new ones coming in from the page. Do pop them in if anyone's got any. But I was wondering, I mean, you said you enjoy even the common species, but is there any particular beetle that you really would like to see, which you haven't seen yet?
That I haven't seen? Gosh, I haven't seen a male stag beetle.
Really? Oh,
no.
I'm going to make you a bit.
I always see females.
I've got one. I don't know whether I was going to put this on screen, but I mean, it's not a live one. I must admit, it's a deceased one. So as I was saying, he's quite a big one as well. So I should say I found this one dead. I mean, as we said earlier, they don't live very long as adults, and I just pick them up when I find them on the side of the road when they've done their thing. And that's the male there with the big mandibles, and that's the little female.
Also, I think there's a bit of people always say to me, "Oh no, do they bite? Is it really painful?" And those big mandibles are just really just for
the males can't bite.
Yeah, fighting between the males, who's got the biggest mandibles, who can win the most females. So don't be scared by them; they're totally harmless. Like
showing off.
It's all a show.
I did get a nip of a female once, although, because I was just moving her off the road and she bit me. But it's just a little nip, didn't even draw blood. You see, I've had burst bites off my niece. So
I think probably in terms of the most exciting species I've recorded so far this year, and I haven't had a huge amount of time to go out recording, but I did spot a violet oil beetle the other day, which was lovely. It's a common species of oil beetle out of the oil beetle family, but they're just fantastic to see. And as we've been talking as well, there's a little green nettle weevil that's flown into my window, and it's just sitting there. It's in the genus Phyllobius, but I'm not sure which species. So that's nice. But yeah, I think I've got some lingering funnel traps. So I'm thinking I might pop a lingering funnel trap up. I popped some up in my local area in a castle called Powderham Castle, and it's got an old deer park in there that's been there for a good couple of 100 years with some massive old oak trees and full of deadwood. And I found some fantastic beetles in there, lots of sort of tanner beetles and lots of small bark beetles in the family, or in subfamily Scolatini, which I'm really interested in. They're the ones that you quite often will see they make really unusual tunnels in the wood, like galleries. The females sort of fly onto a tree. She'll drill a small hole into it, and then she'll make a little kind of like an entrance gallery, which is like one line, and then she lays eggs along it, and then the larvae sort of chew their way outwards like that, almost like a tree. So they create these really beautiful patterns in the wood, and you can often identify the species by the patterns. So another way you can record beetles is by looking for the presence of them sometimes in that sense. So you could record a lot of bark beetles if you just see the galleries. So that's quite a nice little thing to look for. And they're one that can be difficult to identify if you don't have a microscope and aren't sort of haven't used many keys and things, but the galleries are great. You can easily identify those from pictures online. Yeah.
So maybe easier from the galleries than from the insect itself in that point.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll have to have a look through the iNaturalist photographs and see if there's any out there. I know I've got some old ones which I might have to ping you an email across because I don't know what they are.
Yeah, I've got a great book for that.
It's
translated from Italian, so it's.
And I suppose the tree species, does that make a difference? Are they quite particular in which tree they?
Yeah, some of them are really specific. Yeah. Unfortunately, they do, or they can spread a bit of disease, so they are a good one to watch out for as well in terms of protecting tree species and things like that. In places like America, they have real problems with them. It's not the beetles themselves; it's because they farm a little fungus, and it's the fungus as they travel between trees that actually damages the trees as opposed to the beetles.
I see it's yet another reason why recording things can be important.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes, the beetle I'm hoping to see again this year is the rose chafer. I had one in my garden a few years back, and it was very exciting. A lovely, shiny green beetle.
They're great, aren't they?
I'm hoping they might be breeding in my compost heap, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, the larvae are great to find as well, because if you look in your compost heap, you just find dozens of them. And they just keep coming. Also, cockchafers are great when you see those flying around now, maybugs. When they fly, it sounds like there's a small helicopter coming, and you hear them way before you see them, and you're looking around, and then you just see it flying clumsily through the sky. And they quite often will fly into kitchens and things because they're quite attracted to light, but they're really bad at flying, so they will just fly straight into the wall.
Well, I think that's probably mostly what we've got time for. Thanks so much for coming and sharing your beetle knowledge.
That's all right.
Listeners, please have a look on the iNaturalist at the pictures of beetles we've got out there and have a go at identifying them. So even if you don't know the exact beetles they are, it helps even just to put on the beetle name. So Coleoptera is the order name, and that will help it give to the attention of some of the beetle experts out there on iNaturalist, and I know a few of them out there, and sometimes they've been really helpful in helping identify even quite small obscure things which I find in my garden. So yeah, thanks very much, and we're doing these nature chats for the rest of the afternoon, so have a look and see when they're on, and you can also view them back on the UK DataBlitz Facebook page and have a look for other content from the City Nature Challenge and have a go yourself. Thanks everyone, and thanks Katie.
Bye.
Bye.